Hi, I'm Kelly.
I'm Mike.
Welcome to the Kelly and Mike Show.
Alrighty.
Hey,
Hey,
Mike.
Kelly. Hi, Kelly. Man, we're getting some pretty good
Another one of
videos.
our calls.
I know it. Yeah. You doing all right still?
I am doing fantastically. I think
Fantastic.
we got really productive last time with our build pipelines, and
Right? Yeah.
I'm now eager to get into releases.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you got going on here. I did take a quick look. So I really like your release pipeline, a lot of stuff in it. So please tell me what's special about it. Why do we want to do them?
Sure, I can walk you through what we've been doing. You can see as I've been creating this here, I've had a couple of failures. We're still learning as we go. But trying to set this up as properly as I can to see how I can use best practices and
Yeah.
move my code from one environment to another, really
Yeah.
taking to heart the idea of that build once, deploy multiple, and going
Yeah.
through my stages.
So we did a recording on the build pipeline, which we built that artifact, and now with the release we're going to deploy it, but we're going to deploy it to a dev, a QA, and a production environment that makes it a lot better for us to manage that artifact without having to go recompile it each time. I
can have different settings in each environment, which is pretty critical there. I'm using deployment slots in Azure, so I
sweet.
can have kind of a dev stage production and just swap them around and be using the same packages in each. So it's been really helpful. So you can see here, we're going to look at my Parts Unlimited end-to-end deployment that I've created. I can see where things are. I've got 3 stages, so I've got 3 kind of environments. I have my dev environment, which is where everything goes automatically. I've got a QA environment, which is where my testers are, and of course I've got a production environment.
Nice.
So you can see that this one, my release number 4, is partway through my process. So I'll show you what that looks like. I've got my artifacts. This is what we talked about in our build pipeline. My Parts Unlimited core build. I've got it coming directly from that build. So the artifacts that built, it's coming right into this, and it tells me what artifacts are a part of that.
Right.
So I know that I've got a drop and I've got an ARM templates if I want to use it. But then the cool thing I found was my deployment trigger. So my little lightning bolt here. So right now I have it turned off because I was still figuring things out. But I am looking forward to every time I complete a build, I want to go ahead and push to my dev environment so I can set that trigger.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Then, my build itself is really simple. I took care of most of the hard stuff, my deployment itself is pretty simple. I took care of the hard stuff in the build by packaging it all up as a website. So all I have to do is use this Azure App Service deploy task, and it does pretty much everything for me.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything is parameterized, and it's just taking that zip file that the build created and doing an Azure App Service deploy, and that's all it has to do. And this one is pushing to the dev slot since I have a dev, stage, and production.
Yeah, so what's really kind of nice here with these, again, it comes back to those tasks. Those are the same tasks or same types of tasks that we had in the builds that is now used here for our release, which really simplifies a lot of stuff for us, right?
And as I was looking through these, you can do so many things with these tasks. I've got these filtered for the deployment. But ideally, I want to get to a point where I am deploying everything through my release pipelines, whether that is my infrastructure, obviously my app service.
Databases.
My databases, exactly.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of tasks here.
I love it.
and as well as things in the marketplace that I might want to do for some third-party token replacement. As
You
we
can
talked
even
about in the
deploy.
last one.
So I've used this to deploy out to Apple iTunes Store, the iTunes, and Android stores. So it's really kind of nice. So all that manual process you had to do for approvals and staging it through everything in Apple and Google, it's all handled in here as well with some of these sort of deployment tasks. I did notice there's a couple that are pretty cool. So here's how I explain it to people, for people that I'm working with and our clients, is if you have something like a code or even a Word document, anything that becomes what's called an artifact, right? Whether it's a compiled piece of code or a zip file, and you need to put it from Azure DevOps to somewhere, you can do it. And with these pipelines and everything that you got going on here, these release, if you have servers behind a firewall, it can handle that too, right? So maybe you could explain that a little. How can we get it to inside the firewall?
So with all of your agents, we're using an agent right now that is out inside of Azure, but if I have, say, an on-premises server, I can have an agent on that server that will reach out to Azure DevOps and give us that little hole in between those. You can poke just one tiny hole into something in a DMZ, and it will reach out, grab what it needs to do, and then it can communicate inside of your firewall to whatever it needs to whatever other servers you might have in your deployment groups. We'll just kind of dispose of this one. So in this one, we're in Azure, so we're not really going to any sort of on-premises pool, but you can have those on-premises agents and group them together. So say I've got 10 dev servers or 30 production servers or something more elastic. I can have one deployment pool that will handle all of those for me, so that all I have to say is deploy to production, and it knows I need to deploy to these 9 servers.
Nice.
So really,
a
really
lot
helpful
of
to organize there.
A lot of functionality just for that. I like it. I like it a lot.
One really cool thing about that is the security in that. I have found that to be super useful when maybe anyone can deploy to dev or create a deployment that might go to dev, create a release that goes to my dev environments. But my production ones, I only want my most senior engineers to be able to do anything that affects production. So if they are actually editing the scripts that are going to go there, then I can set that security that says only these people can touch those production servers. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to dig a rabbit hole there to dive into. This is probably the most important part right here. It's just like all these stages. And you know what I love about that screen was the green, the blue. There's even red, right? If there's a problem. But there's actually, it's all color coded a certain way. And if I could just take a second and explain what those are, right? So green filled in, like our dev, is a successful release to that environment, and it is the current release. If you were to click create release, and you don't have to do this, but if you did and it ran, that release for dev would be green outline, but non-filled in, and then the new release for dev would be filled in green. The blue means in process, so anytime you see blue, it's in process. But what's really important here is you have that little thing next to the word QA, which when it's actually running, it's spinning. But that symbol right there is waiting for an approval by you or me. And that just means that in this case, it's a pre-deployment approval because it's in front of the QA, right? And then if we had it a post, that little symbol is on the right side of that little graphic, isn't it? I believe it actually just does the other half of the circle.
Oh, is that right?
We can see it.
Yeah, we can see it. Let's try it.
This is the front half of the circle, and I think it does the back half of the circle. But it also shows you, I've even got a little info message right here. That says, this is pending approval. So I know for this build, it gives me a little flag that something is waiting.
Waiting for us to continue.
So it can't proceed. And those approval gates are going to be pretty critical. One, I can just click right there, and since I'm an approver, I can go ahead and click
Get
approve.
approved, right.
Also, how many of us want to stay up and click approve on a deployment at midnight? I don't want to do that.
No thanks.
So I can say, this needs to deploy, I want it to deploy on Sunday at 4 a.m. And I can click approve on this, and it will say it's been deferred. So if I go here, and we'll just kind of refresh this page, it will give me a little clock that says it's been deferred. So that is really nice if you've got something where you need a certain time for deployment to happen. It can be completely unattended and still have that approval.
Yeah, that's super important. But you have to trust in the process. So once you've done this a few times, then it's like, okay, you know what, we know it works, and we'll go ahead and set this up for midnight and check it first thing in the morning. Obviously, to get a comfort level, you want to do this a couple times, but it does work. When it works, it's fantastic. And
I will even admit to the first time I used a deferred deployment, I even deferred it and then sat up and watched it happen. So
that's funny. I like that. So there's a lot of information just from this screen alone. One is there's that little, so on the QA that you just approved, there is that little guy with the check mark on that side of the QA stage, as well as at the other side of the QA stage. But we don't have it on the dev, and that's kind of that's pretty telling, right? That it's just going to go ahead and deploy to dev, and then it's going to go to QA without any kind of approvals or anything. And then the QA approval, pre-approval, just allows the QA team to kind of guard against any deployments to QA if they're not ready.
It allows each team to own their environment.
Right.
QA
That's a great way to put it.
belongs to QA. So QA gets to decide what comes to them, and also they get to decide what leaves them. So they, like you said, they have to be ready. So they can't be in the middle of testing something and you blow away their environment. But also, they have to approve of this to say this release is good to go before it goes to production. So they can say, and here it's just you and I are the ones approving this here. But we're saying
I like that.
This has
I like
to pass that.
I like that approval order too. You got any order like you and then I, or me and then you, or in sequence, which means in that case it'd have to be you approving then me approving. So it could mean that I have to approve it and then my manager would have to approve it if we put them in that way, or any one user, which is great. So what I have set up, like for QA especially, is I create groups inside of Azure DevOps, and I call it like the QA group. I put all the testers into that group, and then I would just add that group there instead of individually adding them. Because, boy, does that get messy fast if you have a lot of projects and a lot of testers.
It definitely does.
Yeah, you can just add the user to a group, and then they're good. Very nice. So can you explain to me the timeout part right there?
So this will happen for approvals themselves. So if I had not approved that QA deployment a few minutes ago, and it just sat there after however many days, 30 days is your default, it won't even ask for approval anymore. It will just assume that it has been rejected and time that out and not ask for that approval anymore.
Yeah, I think one critical part on that is I don't think it rejects it, because that rejected state shows like the red. I think what ends up happening is it just like dies, right? It does not go further. And one thing that I have found, which drives me nuts, and I wish there was a better way around this, is if I'm deploying several and I have these 30-day timeouts, which are way too long, but my QA team they've been testing a feature, but it's taking, or a set of features, and it's taking a couple days. But in the meantime, the dev team has been pushing stuff. Well, let's say on that 10th deploy out to QA, or the approval for QA on that 10th one, they're like, hey, we're ready to take care of all these other features. The problem here with this long timeout is that they have to go and reject every build up to that one before they can approve the deploy, the 10th one. So by setting the timeout a little bit lower for QA, like you could do like a day or 8 hours or whatever, then it'll time out, and those older deploys, they fall off. So the QA doesn't have to go do anything with them. They can ignore them, and then they can just approve the last one to deploy. So that timeout is critical to fix that problem. It used to be, I remember in the earlier days of Azure DevOps, that it would allow you just to go straight up and approve the last one, and just it would auto ignore all the rest if you did that. But now
they
you
stack though.
yeah, you can approve it, but it gets queued up waiting for all the others to get approved or rejected first.
And that is a little bit of a feature, right? Because I may have something that you've got some dependencies that I don't want to deploy feature Y if feature X hasn't been deployed before it.
Yeah, I
so
could see
making sure
that.
that you're being a little more intentional and that you're not stepping on each other with approvals.
I could buy that. Yeah, it's just a little bit more work sometimes, but it's all right. Approvals are great though. You got to have the approval process in place.
100%. And this will, there's lots of little nuances here. You can see the lightning bolt triggers. This kind of tells you that by default, after dev is there, it's going to try to go to QA.
Yeah.
And so that little checkbox next to the lightning bolt gives you a good visual on that, as well as that checkbox next to the little dude says that a person has to approve this. So just this image, like you said, gives you a great snapshot of what's going to be happening. And just, some good stuff here that I can have multiple stages perhaps running at once. In this case, each one of these depends on the one before it, but I could have another stage and split this off so that two things come off of dev. And maybe I have a UAT environment that I want to go to even before QA happens, or a pre-sales environment that we're just showing alpha features on. So you can split this off so that you've got lots of interdependencies that are working back and forth with each other.
So what do you do to organize your builds? I have gotten into these projects and they have 30 different builds for their web apps, their Kubernetes, database deployments, web services, mobile phones. How do you manage and organize your release pipelines?
So I try to bring as many interdependent things together as possible. To keep things in line with each other, say I've got a mobile app and a web app, I probably want the same deployment for them if they are intended to be released together, so that I don't have to deploy twice. I can deploy once to multiple here. I might, exactly like this, have a dev mobile and a dev web as part of my stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what if in this one project though, I guess what I'm asking, so one of the things that I do, I like that approach. But what I have found, like if you click on the releases on the left under your pipelines, I guess
those are the changes.
What about so instead of having them all listed out here, I love that. So the folders, right? Just like you're clicking on, is you could group those by certain, and you can do this with pipelines as well. But just a way to organize everything. So if you have a bunch of mobile deployments, you put them in those folders. So that's what I was thinking on, but you could have been thinking something totally different for organization.
Absolutely.
There are so many ways to organize this stuff. But what I think the important part is, and it comes back to that first thing we ever talked about, right? Is you got to do what works for your team, and then at that sprint review, or the retrospective rather, at that sprint retro, that's the time to say, I don't like this process. I have 100 builds here. I can't find anything. Can we organize them better? Yeah, let's go ahead and create folders. Or we always are deploying our web and mobile at the same time. I don't want to have to go and approve. Can we have it in one pipeline? And the answer is yes, you can.
Yes, you absolutely can.
Yeah, and it comes back to that one critical thing is do what works with your team.
And don't suffer from analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
If you try and spend days figuring out how you're going to organize your pipelines, you could have spent those days creating
kind of missing the point.
pipelines.
Yeah, and then evolving it, right? Don't let, I used to have a boss that would say to me, don't let perfection get in the way of progress. So,
absolutely.
Cool beans.
You're going to make mistakes, be open to it, and that's what approvals are for, that's what retrospectives are for. In DevOps, including your pipelines, it's part of that same process. So it has to evolve in the same way that your development team evolves.
Right, exactly.
So
Very cool. I
Anything
think.
else you want to see about our environment or releases?
No, I think one of our other videos we're going to talk a little bit about the library and a little bit maybe on the task groups.
Yeah.
We will probably get into more advanced stuff as we go and evolve this whole entire series that we're doing for folks. But the environments is interesting and deployment groups are interesting. There's just a lot of functionality here in one package that can deliver. And again, you don't have to use Azure to use Azure DevOps. Although, of course, Microsoft would like you to. But you can deploy on-prem. You can deploy to AWS. You can deploy to Google Cloud. You can deploy to any like Rackspace or anything else. And even something interesting that I did for a client a long time ago was deploy from Azure DevOps to IoT devices, pushing firmware through Bluetooth. Did it all through Azure DevOps. You had to have that build agent internally, and you had to have those IoT devices close by to be able to have the Bluetooth signal. But I'm telling you, if you can think about it, you can do it. It may be a challenge sometimes, but there's a lot you can do with this.
Who knew physical proximity would come into a factor?
Cloud, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but it's great stuff. All right, Kelly.
And you can even as you buy into this, you can deploy to other deployment tools. We were talking earlier today about using Azure DevOps to create a release to an elastic deployment inside of AWS.
Yeah, that's kind of
so
interesting.
You can use this to communicate in all kinds of ways. You're never tied to one thing in the DevOps world. So.
Yeah, you could even build something here and drop it off to Octopus and have Octopus deliver that package. So you can actually take your code, package it as a NuGet, and then pass it on to Octopus and have Octopus do your deployments.
Yep.
Some neat stuff.
Very cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the talk, Mike. I'm looking forward to the next one, as always.
All right. See you later, Kelly. Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.